Okay, we've kind of looked around, looked inside some of these areas, looked at some of the known pollutants. Now we're going to go to the classrooms and look around. We're going to look for CO2. We also can note some cleaning. Is this room cleanable? Is it clean enough? Well, we've caught some big flying particles, but perhaps that doesn't meet expectations. So when we talk about cleaning, where do you stop? It's like education. You know, you can never do enough of it, but you know, you need to meet expectations. We don't expect a sterile building, but it needs to be clean enough not to cause problems. We like to use the microfiber products. Instead of using a terry cloth or a paper towel, they make new products now that are microfiber that have a huge number of surfaces on them, and it actually collects the particles instead of rearranging them. So we want to remove the particles, not just move them around. We also want to rely on source control. If the custodians can't keep up with the dirt, it's sort of like, well, where's this dirt coming from? Maybe we can solve the problem. If the carpet is contaminated for 20 years worth of dirt, the custodian can't solve what's on the desktops or on the computer screen unless you get that contaminated dirt out of the building. So we look for source control, not just filters. This was a classroom we were in just the other day, and for air to come into a classroom, some air has to leave, right? For fresh air to come in, we have to let some air out of that room. And oftentimes we have a relief grill like in the closet to let air out of the building. Well, these relief grills were open to the attic, which let the air out, but it also let attic air down and debris down. And what we found was attic insulation laying in the closet. Now you notice there's Kleenexes right there, or facial tissue. So you blow your nose, you might get an irritation from these glass fibers. And also there's the coat rack. Guess which kid has an itchy neck by the time they get home? So these are the kind of observations you do as you walk around. We know that asthma triggers, allergy triggers can accumulate in some of our reservoirs. Reservoirs may be rugs from home, stuffed furniture, pillows, blankets, stuffed toys. So we want to eliminate some of these reservoirs, because unless we know where this stuff has been, we don't know what kind of contaminants might be living or breeding or contained in these things. If a love seat had 12 cats on it and you've got a couple of students that are allergic to cats, they're going to miss out. You need to spot check your filters. These filters fix themselves, sort of. At least we're getting airflow. We look for air cleaners. That kind of tells us that somebody's got an issue. Now, do you think an air cleaner like this is going to work if the carpet is completely loaded with particles? Can't keep up, right? It's too little, too late. But at least it's an attempt. It might help out. We don't discourage those. We do discourage overuse of these whiteboard markers and other products that will outgas volatile organic compounds and things. The ventilation system for this classroom wasn't designed for these whiteboard markers. When you've got 20 or 30 markers open, that can overwhelm someone with sensitivities, asthma, allergies, and it's probably not a good practice. We need to limit that to the extent possible and at least make sure we're flushing that room out to the extent that we can. We look around for chemicals from home or other non-district supplied materials that could cause a problem. Poisons, solvents, bleach, wasp spray. Some of this shouldn't be around where kids could get into it and perhaps act out or cause a problem. We find a stain on the sheet vinyl. Well, what's this stain here next to the sink? So you look under the sink, you pull that stuff out, and you find an open drain with mold growing. So you look for clues, and it leads you to maybe a potential problem or not. You don't know until you look. Ceiling tiles, a lot of stained ceiling tiles in our schools. Are they moldy or are they just stained? It's worth eliminating that question by replacing those tiles as soon as you can. Plus, you know when it's getting wet again. You don't know whether it's an old stain or a new one. We look above the ceiling. A lot of our buildings have that suspended ceiling. What's up there? You don't know till you look. We get a ladder, we look up there. You find all kinds of debris. Maybe you find rodent droppings. Maybe not the best thing to have right above people's heads because we know gravity works. And whenever you get a thunderstorm or a jet airplane or someone slams the door, you can shake these particles down and have some exposure. Here's a dead mouse. Or maybe it was Ralph the hamster. Okay. Now here we've got raw fiberglass right above that T-bar ceiling or suspended ceiling. Do you suppose these fibers can filter down and get an exposure? Perhaps that's something you want to note. Is it a problem? Well, you ought to recognize that it's there, just in case. Moisture was trapped behind the vinyl wallpaper. Again, if moisture gets in, it has to breathe right away before it starts composting or growing. More vinyl wallpaper. Is this little office ventilated properly? They haven't changed the name on the door yet. We measure the CO2 in the room, again, to look for air changes, for ventilation. We measure what's coming in from the unit, from the supply air. Now, if it's above our target, you're not going to get below the target because this is supposed to be our fresh air. So it's a real quick way to determine whether that unit is working, whether the dampers are open or the control system's working, or perhaps the filters are plugged and there's just not enough air coming out the way it was designed. Where's our supply air? What's under the books? Another supply air. So we put up a sign, do not cover the vents. Again, we need to have our relief air open. You can see that this is how the air gets out of the room to allow air into the room, and it's covered with cardboard or a piece of wood. So we're not letting air out, which limits the amount of air that we can reasonably expect to come in. Here's another relief air for classrooms. Well, one teacher's not doing us any favors. Here's fresh air intakes that were covered for the season because they were worried about freezing pipes. Certainly you don't want to freeze pipes because then you've got a flood and you close the school for an extended period of time. You got mold issues. So you don't want to have frozen pipes, but you want to have fresh air. Here's a teacher taking matters into their own hands. They turn the system off because it's too noisy. Well, when you turn off the noise, you turn off the air. We shouldn't have to have people stand on a chair and do this. Here's another message from the occupants. They're trying to tell you that, that they need help, right? Here's a computer room that wasn't designed for all these hot computers. And we know that if you increase the temperature or lower the temperature out of the comfort zone, learning suffers. Is this a problem? Perhaps not. Maybe that's a low-cost solution. So again, it's not a problem unless it's a problem, but it's worth taking a note of. We look for critical airflow zones. These are our bad actors. We know there's bad actors in there perhaps. We need to pay particular attention to these. So what we want to see is air going in from the school and going out the exhaust so that this air doesn't get loose and affect people in other parts of the building. Flammables, chemicals, acids should be in a downstream location. Here we've got some fans over the ranges, but they're not exhausted. So we call those forehead greasers. All they're doing is spreading the air back into the room. We want to look around and also make note of all the good stuff. We're not there just to pick on the school, and you shouldn't, just look for the negative. We need to pat people on the back for all the good things they've done. We find plenty of good things in the schools. Here they're exhausting fumes. So when you capture it, get it out of the building, you've reduced that exposure. Instead of relying on ventilation just to dilute it or water it down. We want to eliminate that exposure if we can with some exhaust fans. Here they've taken their artwork and put it into shelves that are attached to an exhaust fan. See the holes? The air goes past the artwork out the exhaust. Now the room doesn't smell and doesn't have odors or pollutants. This is a graphic arts where they took a metal table and they drilled holes in the top and they do their inks on top of here, and that hollow table is hooked to the exhaust fan. So now the fumes go away from the people to the outside.